So the entire universe used to have no stars at all? Yeah, man. It was a time we call the Cosmic Dark Ages. A period shortly after the Big Bang, at which the universe had expanded and cooled to a point where it no longer visibly glowed. While at the same time, matter within the universe hadn't yet sufficiently gravitated into regions dense enough to ignite nuclear fusion, and thus form stars. So for a considerable stretch, the whole universe was just an endless dark void. And stars came into the picture when? Well, we think that it took somewhere on the order of 100 million years for the very first stars to be born. And that transition from a universe completely devoid of visible light to one teeming with stars, the first light sources, is what we call cosmic dawn. That's cool. So, okay, if I was there at the time of cosmic dawn, that endless darkness would begin to fill up with lights everywhere as stars lit up the universe. Not exactly. No? Yeah, no. See, even though stars had finally begun to turn on, you might not have really been able to see any of them, because light from those first stars ever couldn't really go anywhere. What? Why? Because all of it was blocked by a universe-sized cloud of gas. Huh? Let me explain. Once upon a time, the entire universe was so hot and dense that all of the ordinary matter existing within it was in a state of plasma. Conditions in the early universe were too hot for atoms to exist, so instead only their constituent particles did. Nothing but free protons, electrons, and energetic radiation filled all of space. As the universe continued to expand, however, it also continued cooling down. And at a certain point, around 400,000 years after the Big Bang, it had cooled enough for electrons and protons to combine into atoms and stay intact without being broken apart again or re-ionized. So, at that point, the matter filling the universe transitioned from plasma to neutral hydrogen gas. A universe-sized cloud of gas. Exactly. And it was this ubiquitous gas that ultimately gave rise to those first stars. See, small variations in the density of matter throughout the early universe allowed for the gravitational growth of regions that were slightly more dense than others. And after an astronomical amount of time, these regions grew massive enough to kick off nuclear fusion, giving the first stellar generation life. But there was a problem. Though there were these pockets of star formation sprinkled throughout the universe, hydrogen gas was still everywhere. It filled the universe, occupying all of the space in between these newborn stars. And you know what hydrogen gas happens to be really good at? Blocking starlight. Meaning that all of the stars forming at this time are engulfed in a fog that their light can't effectively penetrate through. So for as long as most of this primordial gas stuck around, the universe largely remained dark. Okay, so where'd all the gas go? Well, it bubbled away. Bubbled? Bubbled. See, though all of this gas blocked starlight, it was also, ever so slowly, being burned through in the process. These first stars emitted copious amounts of ultraviolet light, which was energetic enough to ionize the surrounding gas, breaking apart the atoms it was composed of and gradually carving out these growing bubbles of transparency around themselves. Now, individual stars alone had a hard time fighting through all of this cosmic fog. But when the first galaxies and eventual quasars began forming in the early universe, so much energetic light was pouring into space that these bubbles were able to grow to enormous scales and at faster rates, eventually overlapping with one another and persisting until this universal fog had been cleared away entirely. This is known as the epoch of reionization, and it wasn't until its completion, about 1 billion years after the Big Bang, that the universe became fully transparent to starlight. Wow. Cosmic bubbles. Yeah, man, it's how the universe became see-through.